Welcome to Mindset Mentoring for athletes, families, and entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Coach Chuck, and today's guest is someone who knows firsthand the power of resilience, compassion, and the courage it takes to rewrite your life story. J. Lawrence Sangster is an award-winning author and podcaster whose work brings a voice to survivors of trauma, shines a light on the importance of self-compassion, and in growth and healing. Through her book, The Girl Who Flew Over the Honeysuckle's Hedge, and her podcast, Flying Over the Hedge, Lauren explores generational trauma, family estrangement, flashbacks, and the strength it takes to turn pain into purpose. She also serves as a volunteer reader for the Freedom to Choose Project, providing support and feedback to incarcerated women and men learning to transform their own life's perspectives. Her journey is often heartbreaking, but also inspiring. And today we're going to talk about how mindset shapes survival, healing, and ultimately hope. So stay tuned for that.
It doesn't yell, it doesn't bleed, but it's killing us slowly, quietly. Stress, the invisible enemy behind sleepless nights, fractured relationships, fading focus, and dreams left in the dust. It's not just adults. It's our kids, our players, our students. We think it's the stress itself that's the enemy. But the real danger, how we've been conditioned to react to it. What if our normal reaction to stress doesn't have to be normal? What if the most powerful weapon against stress is already inside you?
Welcome back. J. Lawrence Sangster is a Kentucky-born, Maine-based author and podcaster whose storytelling has earned national recognition, including the Richard F. Snow Nonfiction Award. Through her book and podcast, she has powerful insights on trauma, recovery, resilience, and the life-changing impact of self-compassion. A dedicated member of several writers' guilds, Lauren also volunteers with the Freedom to Choose Project, helping incarcerated individuals uncover healthier ways of seeing themselves and their circumstances. Her voice is one of courage, clarity, and compassion. Let's welcome Lauren to the show. Wel-
Hi, how are you?
Welcome, and I am honored to have you. And I thank you for agreeing to come on the show and share your story. Um, why don't we begin by just having you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can kind of begin to talk about your book and life experiences and all that entails.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Kentucky, and right in the Bible Belt. So I had that upbringing in my life, very conservative upbringing around me, even as I was in a dysfunctional family setting. And being raised in that sort of setting really did alter my perspective of life, or I would say it was very different from what my friends had around me or what I thought they had around me. And then as I progressed in life, I carried that with me and still had a great sense of resilience about me. I believe we all do. And eventually in life, I came to a point where I just needed to write my story. I wanted to educate what it felt like growing up with specific perspective in life based on childhood traumas and also trauma I experienced in my mid 30s and how that felt as I go about in my daily life. I wanted to educate what it really felt like to live with the trauma mind from a very early age. And I think I've been successful in how I wrote it and in my podcast and how I discuss it. So that came about all in the last year. And I really, really loved educating people, and I love people telling me uh, that they're getting something from my work. They're getting something from my story. And that gives me a great purpose. And if there's anything that I wanted was to have purpose come from my life experiences. And so here we are.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And again, thank you for sharing that both through your book, your own podcast, and now being a guest on my show. You mentioned perspectives there, and you've said that our um, difficult moments are shaped by our perspectives, and that perspective is a perspective you have of the world in that moment or in that time. And I talk about mindset, and the mindset shapes your perspectives. Now, we're going to get in a little bit more, but your perspective on the things that kind of went on as a child, right, is much different now as an adult. Can you, and in your book, you talk about the different parts that we have, right? Like there's uh, sometimes we might think of as stages, but you have different childhood, you know, uh, developmental stages and all. Can you kind of share a little bit what you have learned about the perspectives that you had and and how, like as a child, how much do you remember what your perspective was at that time? Can you share that a little bit?
Sure. And I think it's interesting you say how much I remember. There are some things, you've heard people say this, I will never forget. There are some emotions or experiences, there are certain days I will never forget. And I, but so there's that. There's that part of me. I'll call certain parts. The parts make up the whole of who we are. We have a resilient part, that's the part I really love about all of us. We have that within us. We have tools that we use, but to help our parts function. I have what I talk about age 5. I call that 5 because it was a very specific event that happened in my life. Age 7, I call that part 7. Another very specific trauma happened in my life. And then there's a part I call friends, and that happened in my mid-30s. There's also the critical part. There's the self-compassionate part. There's the sibling. There's the creative writer. So we all have these parts. However, our perspective is shaped by how we are taught from a very early age to think of ourselves, to think about the world around us, to think about other people, how we are taught to react, whether it's healthy or not healthy. So if we are taught to learn to control our emotion, learn to control our action in a healthy way, then as we mature in life, then we respond to difficult situations in a much healthier way. I wasn't given that. I grew up with parents who came from their own dysfunctional families, and I was not taught to handle difficult situations in a healthy manner. I was taught to be quiet. Children were taught to be seen and not heard. When I needed to use my voice at age 5 with a very specific trauma, I write about this in my very first chapter of my book, and it helps you understand why the book is called "The Girl Who Flew Over the Honeysuckle Hedge." I am that girl, and my mind flew over a honeysuckle hedge during a traumatic moment for me. So how we progress in life and how we handle situations, I truly believe, and of course psychology tells us this, is how we're taught early in life to to react to difficult situations. And if we don't progress and learn on our own, and I do believe that it's up to each individual to recognize where we have a problem and how we respond to difficult situations, then we must learn to use the tools that we all have within us, but we haven't been taught perhaps by our parents. And so we have to learn how to better function and shape our perspective of life. And I mean, that's, how we view everything, how we view other races, how we view other social classes, how we view our peers, especially how we view ourselves. I hope that answers that.
No, you did. Right on. And it's one of the reasons why I am so adamant about trying to get to younger people. And my focus has a lot have been on teens, sometimes at an early age. Some of the things that I talk about and try to teach developmentally that the younger kids aren't ready for some of those things. But there are other there's definitely certain habits and things that you can begin teaching young children to deal with the storms of life. And sadly, there are degrees of storms and really, you know, hard, very difficult, challenging ones. And yours, kind of began at 5 years old, right? So as through all the healing that you've done over these years, what what do you think? Now you couldn't necessarily take away what happened, but but is there anything that you can think of on what it is that may have helped the 5-year-old you try to deal with that better? I mean, it was at such a young age. It's hard to process those kind of things.
Yeah, I don't know that, I look back, and one thing I've learned in therapy is it was what it was. I wasn't given the tools. I needed to use my voice, but especially in the situation I was in. And I tried a different method. In my book, I talk in that first chapter, I talk about how I wanted to protect myself and the family. And so I went around locking all the doors and the windows because I knew that my father locked the doors at night to keep us safe, and I wanted to feel safe. So I locked all of the doors and the windows. And sadly, that resulted in a sibling was on the outside of the door. She wanted in uh, through a storm door, and she injured herself quite badly. And so, in that moment, the best that my mind could do, the resulting uh, what happened after that was that my parents needed to care for my sibling who was physically seriously injured. She nearly severed her hand through an accident that was caused by me locking the door and her wanting in and pounding on the glass door. Um, in that moment, my own trauma that my parents didn't even know what was happening. They didn't know why I wanted to feel safe. They thought I was playing a game, and I was probably smiling because I'd come up with a solution to
Hmm.
keep me safe. And I was told I couldn't say what happened to me, and you can guess what happened to me. And in that moment of trying to help to keep myself safe, someone else was injured. So the best that my mind could do was just get out of the situation. I look back at that now, and I know I did the best that I could. I know that my parents, I even, now I would think, how could they, or then I could think, how could they leave me? How could they abandon me standing in a front yard as they drove off with my sibling to try and save her life, her hand, if not her life? Now I look back and I think, oh my goodness, they didn't know what was going on in my mind, and they were trying to save my sister's life. And I have to show them compassion for what they didn't understand. And I think part of uh, now, as I look through situations in life, is absolutely showing not just myself compassion in that moment when someone else was hurt because I was trying to do something for myself, but to show the people around me compassion who didn't even know what was going on because I didn't know how to use my voice because I wasn't taught to use my voice to speak up about certain situations. And I'm talking about sexual abuse had happened to me just the night before or the weekend before. I don't remember, but that had just happened to me. And I wanted to be safe. And today, of course, it's very different. Today, we teach children to say, someone touched me, someone, or no, stop. Then I didn't have that instruction and I didn't know what to do or how to use my voice. And I think teaching children to respectfully be able to use their voice and to deal with these emotions that might come up is so vital to how we progress in life. Because then I didn't know how to use my voice, and I was taught not to use my voice for a number of years. And I was scared. Once I thought I could use it, I didn't think anybody could handle it. And that's the trauma I'm thinking. So yeah, it is vital to catch them early, catch the children early and teach them early that it's okay to use your voice and that it's okay to speak up, but also to do it respectfully and to learn to control our emotions when we're doing that.
Yeah, those events, well, you gave it a little different view of it, but it's the ripple effect of things that begin to spread out, and impact other people and relationships and all of those things. And it in your in your life, in your story, there was, it started at 5, but then there are other things that happen all the way up into adulthood. Can
Yeah.
you kind of talk about how you see if there was connections to that, to how what happened when you were a child, did did any of those things shape you in a way that then, it was that again a ripple effect of how things went through? Can you kind of talk about some of those other experiences and one thing after another? Yeah.
Absolutely, and I get, I get, you read my book and you flipped through it, so you get how much happened. So I went through some pretty serious traumas from early childhood, and I don't mind, just naming the three significant ones for me when I was up until I was a teenager. I had sexual abuse. The incident with my sister really affected me and how I was allowed to um, express myself or not express myself. I had to be a good kid and not get in trouble and not hurt anyone if I could. At age 7, because my parents had such a dysfunctional romantic relationship, such a dysfunctional marriage, during a domestic dispute, and you can learn about this in my book. I'm not going to go into the whole details of it, but my mother was shot. This was in 1970, and sadly, 1970, domestic violence wasn't even a term, and women were not, there were no shelters. They didn't come about for a few years. So the legal system was not in my mother's favor. The medical system was not in my mother's favor. And because of how the details of the shooting played out, my mother was told to go home and be a better wife and mother, which I find extremely sad, but that's exactly what she tried to do. So that happened, and then at age 12, during another domestic dispute, um, my father was stabbed by my mother in a self defense moment. Of course, they both lived, and I was really shocked that they didn't stay together. That they stayed together, they didn't separate. But this was part of my mother's belief, for better or for worse. And God love her. That was how she felt. That's what had been put in her mind, was that it was her responsibility to stay, make the marriage work, keep the family together. Something I'm pretty against in many ways. If your life is in danger, if your children are being affected, don't be in the relationship. But that's a whole other podcast we could go into. So these shapings, but especially age 5, I had to be perfect, not use my voice, Be a good kid. Don't get in trouble. At age 7, and I talk about this in my book, my mother was shot. I didn't see her for a number of weeks. It seems like it was a month, but I don't exactly recall how long the period was between when my mother was taken to the hospital and I was able to see her. When I was able to see her, I was terrified. My father left us in the waiting room, and he left to go get her when she came. When I saw him coming down the corridor of the hospital toward us, I saw someone that didn't look like my mother. She had tubes coming out of her. She looked frightening. Her eyes were sunken. And to me, she just looked like a creature being willed toward me. So I was afraid. I hid behind a column. And I will never, this is one of those moments I will never forget my mother crying because I was afraid of her and saying, doesn't my baby want to come and hug me? And I didn't want to. I didn't want to because I didn't know what to do with that person that didn't look like my mother. I finally succumbed and went and threw myself in her lap. And I have never forgotten that I made my mother cry. That's still hard for me. I have never forgotten what it felt like to make her cry. And in that moment, I never wanted to hurt my mother again. And I tried very hard in life. That shaped how I acted in many ways in life, trying to please her, trying to make sure she was okay, never wanting to hurt her, always checking up on her. And I did that up until her death. My concern for her health and her safety were there for the rest of my life until she died. She died 9 years ago. So until then, I just didn't want to hurt her. How this shaped things that happened in France, and maybe we'll talk about that more later, but I was in a very serious situation. I was captive. I was raped, I was beaten, and I was tortured with my injuries. There I was with a trauma mind. I had come out of and this is an odd thing to say, but it's in my book. I talk about it on my podcast. I come out of a relationship with a person of nobility, Hungarian nobility, in a famous family in America. I don't say the name in my book because that's his agreement, his and my agreement. We're still very good friends. But in that relationship, I was given the directive, don't cause a scandal. And I didn't want to cause a scandal. I was in this horrible situation in France. I wanted to get out of it. And I didn't know how to do it without causing a scandal if I raised too much attention. But more importantly, I had dealt with so much in my childhood that was difficult, that was hard, that was traumatic to me, that my mind thought I should be able to deal with this and handle this on my own. So I had the concern for causing a scandal, didn't want to do that. I didn't want the attention. I was also ashamed of what was happening to me. And I did not want, I was trained to think that I should be able to deal with this, somehow get out of it on my own. So from early childhood into that moment was, I was trained. I was trained by trauma to just deal with trauma, even though this was very, very different. The other was more trauma happening around me, except for age 5, of course, but there was trauma happening around me. There was dysfunction happening around me. This was happening to me, and it was quite, quite serious. I'm actually been told over and over I was lucky to make it out alive. But yeah, that's how I was shaped throughout life because of that, because of my early trauma and how I was taught to deal with it, not just by my family, but by society.
So, you're an adult now, and all these things have happened. What was the trigger, do you think, for that really enabled you to begin the process of healing? What was it that you you know enough so now because you came to a point where some people would have just kind of given up, right? They just would have, and we've probably all seen stories of that, or seen movies about the person who just, you know, ends up just kind of surrendering to all the horrific things. But you didn't, and as your book title kind of says, it's been a lifelong journey of healing. So what do you think it was, or do you know what it was that kind of flipped that switch of like, you know, I'm gonna I'm gonna heal from this. I'm gonna start down a different road, or I'm not sure how to phrase it, but can you can you share a little bit with that?
Sure. I I think I've always had uh, for me, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not just a saying, but there's always been a light at the end of the tunnel. I just have to work to the light, and whatever that means, psychologically or physically. I had some injuries to heal after France. I write about the injuries I sustained in my book, and I also believe that I'm alive, and I want to live with the happiest heart that I can, which means that I can't harbor anger. Even though anger was there for a long time, I didn't want to feel angry towards life. I wanted to feel happy. So, right after I came back from France, I'd already been in therapy, with my therapist talking about childhood experiences. So I knew, again, I can say her name, Molly. Molly was my therapist for 17 years in New York. Um, and with her, uh, I knew that I just wanted to have a healthy mind, to be able to be in a healthy relationship, not the type of relationship that I saw my parents in. I didn't think I wanted a family because I was concerned for, if I'm honest, about genetics and passing on trauma from my own system, because I believe we can pass on trauma to our own children. I was concerned about, and I chose not to have children for that reason. But I wanted to be healthy. And so after France, I said, okay, I have a lot to work through. I have a lot to process. And I went and I called my therapist and I said, I need to come and see you. And I was in therapy for 5 days a week, for a long time. It finally got down to 3 days a week. And you just keep moving forward. And in my book, I talk about the wayward dance towards healing. Sometimes I would take a step forward and a leap backwards. And
Hmm.
then I'd have to take 2 steps forward and maybe a leap and then 2 steps backward. And I write about what that felt like each time. I write about certain experiences or certain moments that felt great to me and certain ones that felt awful to me. Um, and then it was funny. I write about it, and I would write, this is a side step or a back step or a forward leap, and I decided to draw the arrows. And I was so excited when I saw just how much I went up, towards healing. If you want to say up is healing, it could be sideways, but um, and I just wanted that. Uh, One of the other things I always kept in my mind is, this man that injured me in France said that, and this was the catalyst for me to begin fawning, to save myself. Um, he said that when he was finished with me, no one would ever want me or care what happened to me. And that stuck with me. That really stuck with me for a long time. And I thought, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not going to let him win. If I keep that in my mind, and if I believe that the way that because he injured me quite a lot. If I believe that I can't overcome this, then he wins, and I would not let him win. I could not let him win. So sort of, it's a challenge for myself, and Yeah, I mean, that's what I kept in my mind. I wanted to be a healthy human. I don't want to just exist. I want to exist happily. I think we all want to. I had a lot to overcome. Many of us have a lot to overcome. But if we want to exist happily, we keep moving in the most positive way that we can.
And you said something in the beginning of that response about seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. That just made me think about one of the coaching processes and techniques I use, and I utilize timeline therapy quite a bit. It's a wonderful, wonderful, powerful tool for all kinds of things. But one of the processes I do with that is what I call the enlightenment process. And the whole idea behind timeline therapy is that our memories are put in time order. That's why we can tell the difference between what happened a week ago or a year ago, right?
Right.
And we can we can visualize in our mind's eye what this might look like, this timeline of memories. And I have people go back to the very beginning into the light. Um, so it's metaphors often come about because they are a reflection of what we experience inside, right? So, when you talk about uh, the light at the end of the tunnel, that's often what people literally on the unconscious level begin to kind of see that light in the beginning or at the end. When we talk about trusting gut instincts, we're learning more and more about the gut biome and all its influence on things. So a lot of these metaphors we use are an indication of what's going on inside our mind and body. So when you said that, I was like, oh, so that's kind of part of what was going on, I think, in your own unconscious and all. And that ability is powerful for for healing and all that.
I also, as you were talking about it, it's interesting that you mentioned gut instinct, and I actually did a podcast on this, and I talk about how I write about it in my book. My gut kept trying to talk to me, and I ignored it in France, and I write about all reasons going on in my head why I ignored it, and would not listen to these uncomfortable feelings coming up in my body. Uh, and I have to, when we ignore our gut instinct, why? And then you have to talk about emotional intelligence. I did not have the emotional intelligence to trust my gut instinct because I was so worried from my childhood teachings of my self worth, my confidence. I have to be a good person. I have to people please. I don't want to be difficult. I don't want to cause a scandal. And if I had had the emotional intelligence. And it doesn't make me feel good to say I didn't have the emotional intelligence at the time, but I really didn't because I was so concerned what everyone else would think that I honestly didn't know how to save my life for a little while. I thought I was supposed to just deal with everything and instead of somehow getting out. I don't know how I could have gotten out any sooner. I know that I accept that I did the best I did, and I did what I did the way I did it, and I'm alive. But it is interesting you talk about gut instinct, and we are just really starting to learn
Mm.
about it. It's so related to the vagus nerve that many of us don't even know what we have or how it operates. But yeah, so that's very interesting you brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah, the interplay between our heart, our gut, our mind, uh, the spiritual side of things that we don't really, I, I'm afraid we don't really understand. I mean, it's so hard to kind of um, study that, right? I mean, like the spiritual side is something, but yet we are spirit beings, and that so often plays in too. I often think of it in kind of as the realm where the emotions and inspiration lay in, and the interconnection between all those different systems. You also mentioned in there, uh, you said the word belief about you belief about yourself and this your self identity. when did that really begin to play into your healing process? When did you begin to kind of do that work on yourself? Because you said, you talk about in your book, right, the self-compassion and all of that. Was there a point where that really where you really recognize that, oh, this is what I really need to do, and began to do that work?
Yeah. So when I began to fawn in France in order to save myself, meaning that I was pleasing, I went along with what my captor wanted from me. I told him what I believed he wanted to hear. He wanted me to say, I'm broken. He wanted me to say, I know no one else will ever want me. I'm only going to be with you. He wanted uh, to see me crying and begging and telling him that everything he was doing to me was my fault, and he had to do those things to me because I wouldn't listen, or I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't enough of anything. That he needed to hear me say certain things and do certain things and act a certain way, and that's what I did. And I survived, and I'm lucky I survived. And so then you move forward, and I go to therapy, and I do a lot of talk therapy. Uh, I did a different type of therapy you don't hear about a lot today, but consecutive therapy was, something in the 90s, in the late 90s and early 2000s, I tried consecutive therapy. I didn't know about EMDR. I didn't know about other methods of healing, but I went through so many years of talk therapy, read so many self-help books, and used my coping methods, good ones, not great ones, very tough on myself. For me, a huge coping method was exercise. I love running, and I'd run 30 miles a week. The endorphins kick in, and man, that just felt terrific to me. So time, doing the best I could, I get to a certain point, and I finally think, okay, I'm pretty good. 9 years later, I think I can date again. I met my husband. That's a whole other thing. How do you tell somebody, this is where I was, this is where I come from? He was just beautiful. He was just beautiful, and how he handled it. We ended up getting married, of course, and then we moved here. My husband passed away, and that is when I really had to face how much I had not healed versus how much I had. I thought, okay, I've healed as well as I can. Look at me, I'm in a very loving,
Mm.
caring relationship. When he passed away, oh, everything kind of changed for me. Everything kind of shifted. And then COVID hit, and other people. By the way, several people in my life passed away. Both of my parents, my surrogate parents, a few of my closest friends, my husband. Oh my goodness, even my dog died. And I felt like it was a little bit of a pop, uh, apocalypse world for me. And so I started feeling like, universe, what do you want with me? I put myself in therapy, and it was a therapist. I write about him in my book. We didn't have the best relationship. I couldn't find a trusting relationship with him. But what he did do was help me to begin to practice better self-compassion. And the one part of myself I had not really shown compassion for was that part of me that did what I had to do to get out of France. I don't consider myself a manipulative person, but I manipulated a human being. I did whatever I needed to do in order to get out of the woods. I was in the French Alps, deep in the woods. I remember when we got to the house, him pointing way, way in the distance to a little tiny white spot and letting me know that was the closest home to us. And that's how secluded I was. And so I did what I had to do to get out of there. I managed to get home. I never really forgave that part of myself. It affected me greatly. for a long, long time. When I started finally looking at that part and saying, you survived. You survived a situation that so many people, the police force in New York, my therapist, other therapists, friends, that not many people knew a lot about it. My therapist, police force knew. They all told me that it's pretty remarkable I made it out alive. So I made it out alive. What a what a part that I should be holding great respect for instead of such contempt. And so when I finally started showing respect for that part of me that could do what I needed to do to survive as a strong and resilient human being or part of me, then I started to really heal. And it started to feel pretty remarkable. I started to think, oh, wow, you're a pretty sad, you're a pretty strong woman. And I never really thought of myself as that before. I never really thought of how I got out of that situation as anything to be proud of. But once I started thinking prideful towards that ability to think, okay, this is, I couldn't, flight, fight, or fawn. I couldn't go anywhere. There's nowhere to run to. I couldn't fight because he was so much stronger than me, and it was nothing for him to injure me. And I wanted to stay as healthy as I was, even though I had sustained injuries. I wanted to stay healthy. So once he made the statement, no one will care what happens to you or ever want you again, that's when fawn kicked in. And once I I accepted that I did what I did, I started to heal. And it's been really remarkable. It's been a remarkable transformation in my mind to be okay with that, and then to be okay with using my voice to talk about it.
Yeah.
I couldn't have talked about this 4 years ago. I could not have had this interview 4 years ago, and here I am. And it's a conversation we need to have, and if I need to tell this story to help someone else, then I'll do it.
Yeah, I want to come back to that in just a moment too. But you you said several times during this you've talked about the different parts, right? And we all have different parts of us, and sometimes those parts come into conflict, right?
Yeah.
And there's actually I've been coaching somebody who's actually this week going for several world records, and part of the coaching work I was doing with him found out there was some parts conflicts there about what might happen if he succeeded and not succeeding, and that conflict was going to prevent him from really, uh, you know, finding his full potential. Because if you're in conflict internally, it manifests itself in so many different ways. So we had to resolve that. So when you kept talking about these parts, part of what you've been going through is resolving some of those conflicts. It sounds like, right? That's
Yes.
yeah. So um, it's and it fascinates me, anyways. That whole
It's interesting because that me not being able to come to grips with that part held me back for a long time. Even my husband, we had a very loving relationship. He knew a good deal of my story, but he didn't know a lot about me and a lot about it. I didn't go into great detail, uh, and I didn't have the authentic relationship, a real authentic relationship. Uh, because I couldn't talk about it, because I couldn't resolve or come to grips with that part. And I always felt like I had to hide certain emotions or certain feelings and my voice. There were so many times I'd be in the middle of a conversation with someone and I think, oh boy, do I have a lot on that. But I wouldn't say it because then I'd have to talk about why I feel this way
yeah
strongly, why I have this opinion about this. And so I would just go mute and not, a deer in the headlights and not say anything. And I had people say, "Oh, you went quiet all of a sudden." I think, "Oh boy, you have no idea." And now today, it doesn't bother me a bit. So it is true. You have to come to grips with those parts and come to terms and show self-compassion and show self-compassion and
Well,
then use your voice or do whatever you need to do. And here I am doing it, and it feels remarkable. It feels absolutely remarkable. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
completely different in
It,
my approach to many conversations today.
that whole idea changed. I still remember when the first training program I went through with Tony Robbins on learning NLP techniques and
I love him, by
learning.
the way.
Pardon me?
I love him, Tony Robbins.
Oh, fantastic. But they were teaching us something called a visual squash technique to resolve these conflicts. And I had a like a really blessed childhood and all, but yet even in that there was a conflict that as we're learning how to do this that I had internally when they taught us this technique that brought those parts together. I can still vividly remember getting sweaty palms, tingling throughout my whole body,
Yeah,
feeling the flush of the color in my face as these the conflict between the parts were getting resolved. It was it felt remarkable. Anyways, and you know that's part of that healing, right? And it can be a little piece or it can be
yeah,
pretty significant, but it definitely will have an impact on your body and mind and soul and all of that.
yeah.
Um, I do want to ask you because you had mentioned too, and with your writing of the book, right? So you have felt uncomfortable, which completely understandable. I mean, like that's not something I think most people would want to share or talk about because it can be really painful. But now you do, and your book, I believe it was just came out this year, right?
Yeah, in March. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it's relatively new for you. What kind of got you over that hump? And you've kind of alluded to the fact that you are now getting some real satisfaction out of knowing that your story is helping others. But I imagine there was a whole lot of the fear, anxiety, all those things about doing this. What was it that finally got it? And is the process been important for your healing growth?
Absolutely. I really did get to a point, and I talk about this in my book, where I didn't know how to want to be here. When my husband died, it felt like, are you kidding me? I spent 9 years to figure, after France to meet this wonderful man, and I only had him for 12. And you know what? You gave me a little bit of happiness, universe. Now, are you kidding me? And I really struggled a lot and I lost so many people in my life. And then COVID happened, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how do I go on? And it really was a struggle to want to wake up in the morning, to want to be here. I didn't know how to want to be here. And I write about this in my book. A not so sunny thing happened, and I finally said, if I'm going to be here, I have to make purpose. I have to have purpose with all of this. Uh, and I have to talk about acupuncture for me. I started acupuncture for a physical ailment, um, not long, and not too long before I began to write my book. And I had the best acupuncturist. He treats
Mm,
very specifically PTSD patients, and very specifically, usually veterans with PTSD. And acupuncture is, wonderful for helping treat flashbacks. I was very stuck when I went to him. As I said, I had a physical ailment. I had used acupuncture once before. I told my doctor here in Maine that. She said, okay, let's try acupuncture. During the process of filling out all of the forms you have to fill out, and they go into your mental health state. And I said, okay, my new thing is I'm going to be honest. And I answered honestly, yes, I've been through trauma. Yes, I'm a widow. Yes, I'm depressed. Yes, I'm not sure how I would want to be here. And my acupuncturist said, I think you qualify for treatment for PTSD. And would you like to try it? Again, I had to go 5 days a week for a little bit. What I learned is that I'm one of those, different therapies work well for different people. I
Hmm.
tried EMDR, didn't work for me. I tried acupuncture. I was very responsive to it. Even in a matter of something like 3 months, I finally said, I'm going to write my book, you know? And as I began to write, I talked to my acupuncturist about it. I said, look, I'm going to write some tough stuff. How can you help me as I believe I'm going to probably re-traumatize myself during some of the writing? And there were moments where it was pretty tough for me. I'd go in with flashbacks happening. I'd go in feeling truly traumatized. I remember writing, I would house sit pets so that I could just be in a different setting writing. And I was in this one area where it was woods, and I was writing about France. And I got terrified trying to take a walk in the woods. And so I called him and I said, I need to process this, work through it. He got me in for treatment. And it really does help. You are, the way that I put it is, when you are doing acupuncture and you are trying to face your fears or your flashback or your trauma experience, you are more open to facing it and sitting with it. First of all, so you can't go anywhere. You're on a table with needles in you, but you are there and the energy is flowing, and you are able to realize you can face it, sit with it, and when you walk away and think about it again, it isn't as bad. It isn't as bad a trigger. It isn't as bad the emotional effect. So that happened a lot as I was writing. At the same time, I was, for the first time, the man that I write about, Laszlo, who is the ex-partner, the Hungarian nobleman. I said, would you be my alpha reader? And my sister-in-law, I said, would you be an alpha reader for me and let me know what it feels like to get my story, to have someone read my story? I'd feel sick. I'd send each stage of writing to them or each chapter, and I would feel physically ill sending it because I was terrified. I was, for the first time, people who thought they knew me. Laszlo has been in my life for 35 years, and he thought he knew a good deal of the story, and he didn't. And and I would ask them for feedback, and they both gave me the most loving, compassionate feedback they could, and that helped me a great deal in the oh, people can hear it and the world isn't going to stop. I'm not going to fall into the ground. They're still going to talk to me. They're still going to treat me with respect and kindness and all of that. And then I had to, at the suggestion of my editor, well, of course, we're concerned how the public would take it. But I wrote for educational purpose, and I'll tell you that in a minute. But I had to get beta readers, and your friend John was one of my beta readers, and I needed to get their feedback, and their feedback was all uplifting and positive and compassionate and understanding, and that helped me a great deal. Oh, not only do people who love me and know me accept my story, but people who don't know anything about me, because I had to not know them as a beta reader and not speak to them until after they read my book. So that was greatly, greatly encouraging to me. Doing the podcast was very scary, but I felt like I wanted to dive deeper, and it was. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted to talk more in depth about certain subjects that I raise in my book. And then once that part started falling into place, and I got through it, it all happened. And then, of course, they all released, the book and the podcast series released in the same week. And that has been, oh boy, it's just been different. It's been a different world, and the responses I received have been overwhelmingly positive, and uplifting. And when I hear, the best thing that I could ever hear is, reading your book helped me, listening to your podcast helped me. Um, that's what I wanted. I don't care about well, I shouldn't say I don't care, but I didn't write for the general public. I wrote to help people, and I wrote the way that I wrote. Uh, if I want my book to be read as suggested reading for psychology students who want to work with trauma patients, then I had to write open and raw and honest so that they could really get inside of the mind of what it felt like from someone who experienced early childhood trauma and how it affected me through life. So that's what I wrote for that as well, to educate, but to educate the people wanting to help
Yeah.
people through trauma.
Writing has a it's a it's powerful on so many levels. In the case of writing a book in that length and all, that there's all kinds of layers to that, and um, glad you decide to do that too, because it is, I think, important for people to have models of what's possible for healing and survival and all of those things. I think it's so important. Um, but one of the things that I strongly encourage when I talk about two essential rituals that I really try to help people create, morning and an evening, because we have morning and we have evening habits, but we really want some to build some things in our life that are ritualistic and can help on all kinds of levels. But journaling is one of them, and journaling has been talked about for a long time. The power of journaling, and I strongly encourage it. I went through some phases of journaling, but over the last number of years, I'm a I'm a regular journaler, and that was some of the other things that really helped me after I lost my wife to cancer back in 2022. Those
Right.
those rituals, including journaling, were so helpful and therapeutic, and it didn't. Sometimes it might be 3 or 4 lines, but just those 3 or 4 lines were just getting them out down on paper, help the reflection process. Um, so sometimes I think people think, oh, I don't want to journal. I don't want to spend all that time. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. But just getting it out of your head onto paper and seeing that can be really, really powerful. So,
Yeah, I think it's extremely powerful. Of course, I write. I've been writing since I was a kid. Sometimes the journal was the only thing I had to talk to with my honest feelings, and that's the case for many of us. There's a we call it a diary. There's a reason we have that secret diary and we write down everything in. Um, and I wrote for many years. I had just the spiral notebooks. I had those filled. Um, didn't look at them. I actually looked at them a few years ago, about a year before I started writing my book. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wrote that. I can't believe I wrote that. And I had a whole list of things I wanted to write about. But also, there's a way of healing. I don't know if you know the term freedom writing, but it is something that is taught through the Freedom to Choose project. The project I work with, I do volunteer reading for incarcerated individuals in the program. I do the reading online and provide them compassionate feedback and understanding. And one of the things I learned through this, it's taught me so much actually, is about freedom writing, and they are taught. Many of them don't believe they can express just how they came into their situation, or their feelings about it, or the emotions about what it feels like being there. But if they do the freedom writing, they're encouraged to write down everything raw and honest and then tear it up and throw it away. So they get it outside of them. Don't look at it. Don't reread it. Throw it away. And many of them, many of the people who do the freedom writing talk about how much of a relief they have to answer a question. How are you
yeah.
feeling right now? I feel depressed. I feel angry. I feel frustrated. Go and do 10 minutes of freedom writing. Now, how do you feel? And they always say, I feel so much better. I'm so glad to get that off my chest. It's gone. And they have to do that in several sessions in this one lesson. And each time, no matter how they're feeling, the writing has helped them. And it helps me. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I send myself an email with one word or two words in it that expresses how I feel about something or that I want to write about the next day. And I do that. I won't say I write every single day, but I will write a word or a sentence every single day.
Just noticed that we are coming near the end of the time, and I still have some more things I want to ask you. But the one thing I think I want to leave my audience with is what do you do now to kind of help you manage your emotions to continue that healing process? Are there certain rituals that you have in your life that are like, oh boy, if I didn't do that, you know, I just wouldn't be the same. Are there strategies that you use?
There are. I think exercise for me has always been important. It's always such a releasing stress. I get up now every morning and I do 30 minutes of stretches and light exercise. Later in the day, I might do a run or a walk or a bike ride. Yesterday, I did another 30 minutes of exercise. Part of that's my age. It feels good to stretch out and to move around a bit. I have always listened to music, and the important thing with that is there's music that we listen to. Oh, you understand how I'm feeling about this. I love this song, but we also have to listen to the positive. If you're feeling down and some song resonates with you, but it's also a downer, don't keep listening to it. Go to a positive song as well. Very uplifting, upbeat song because that feeds your brain as well, and we want to go positive. I do deep breathing exercises. I do part of that as part of my stretch and morning routine now. Very importantly, I set boundaries, and I didn't know how to set them effectively before because I wanted everyone to like me. I wanted to try and like everyone. Now, if there's a problem and I realize it's really not coming from me, but you, and we can go through that in a series of conversations. If we can't come to where I feel comfortable in your presence, you don't sit at my table anymore. That doesn't mean I don't have passion and understanding and want happiness and good health for you. It just means that I recognize that there's an uncomfortableness here or a disrespect, and if that keeps happening, we don't see each other. We can be polite, say hello, but we don't see each other and spend any time together. And I think that's very important for me to set those boundaries, and I do, and it feels remarkably good. So.
Well, thank you for sharing it, and I love that because the things you said are anybody who knows any of the stuff I put out online, any of the writing stuff, what you said with exercise and music and deep breathing, these are like part of my essential components of good, healthy routines. And I,
Self-compassion,
yeah,
self-compassion also when we make
yeah,
that mistake, when we don't get it right, when we say the thing we didn't wish we hadn't said. Self-compassion, reflect on it. Why did you? And then move forward. Don't keep hanging on your mistakes or your little setbacks. Don't do that.
yeah. Thank you so much. I website or for your and I'll put links like I know they can get your book on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all of that. But your podcast and all, what's the best way for people to find that and get to that?
You can go to my website which is named, my podcast is actually named after my website, which is flyingoverthehedge.com. My podcasts are all listed there, but you can also go to any podcast, venue like Spotify. You can get it on YouTube, but I have them listed there, and you can click right into it if you want. And I have good notes from this podcast, from the podcast, because I mentioned my research I've done to talk about certain subjects. Because I'm not a mental health professional, I'm just someone who's experienced a lot of trauma. And so when I do bring up certain subjects, I like to make sure I've researched it. And then I have that on my website to show you and to tell people where they can go to find out more information. So flyingoverthehedge.com is the best bet.
Fantastic. And we'll have a link for that in the description to this too. So thank you. It was an honor. I greatly appreciate you taking the time out to share and to talk about this important subject. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for considering me. I feel honored and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. For all of you out there, as always, um, it's such an important thing for us to think about our mindset and all the beliefs and all those things that go into shaping how we deal with the storms of life, regardless of the severity of those storms. In this interview, we talked a little bit about emotional intelligence, the importance of that, and again, I am always open to coming to your organization, your business, schools, anything to talk about. My signature speech is planting possibility, but it touches on all those things, and it's such an important message with some real valuable skill sets. So I would encourage you all to reach out to me, coachchuck360.com, coachchuck360.com. You can text me, you can email me, you can what have you. If you are interested in bringing me to talk to your organization, your summer camp, coming into your school, um, there's some really important messaging and skill sets that can be brought in and introduced to your group. So I would encourage you to do that. And until next time, I encourage you to live life to its fullest.